The night my life cracked open, it started with one smug photo and 6 little words. Family only. We finally have everyone. I was sitting at my small kitchen table in Cleveland, still in my scrubs, my dinner half cold, when the notification lit up my phone. It was my younger brother Dylan posting from our parents' big suburban mansion back in Ridgefield. They were all there under the chandelier I had helped pay for. My parents, my brother, his fiancée, a few cousins, even my aunt who never flies anywhere. They were all dressed up like it was a wedding rehearsal. My mother was in a pale blue dress, my father in his favorite gray suit. In the middle of the table, I could see a man in a dark blazer holding a folder. I recognized him instantly, Attorney Blake, the family lawyer. My heart dropped before my brain caught up. They had scheduled the reading of the will, our parents' will. The one we had talked about many times in vague, careful terms. The one that held the future of the house, the land, the family business my grandfather started. The will that was supposed to be about inheritance, security, doing right by their children. They had done it without me. I zoomed in on the picture until the pixels broke apart. There was an empty chair near the end of the table, napkin neatly folded, wineglass untouched. For a second I wondered if that chair was meant for me, if something had gone wrong last minute. Then I saw the caption again. Family only. I was excluded on purpose. My name is Lauren Miller. I was 32 that fall, and I had been paying my parents' property taxes and most of their medical bills. For years, I am a registered nurse in an oncology ward, used to holding strangers' hands while they get the worst news of their lives. I thought I knew what heartbreak looked like. I was wrong. If you have ever looked at a picture of your own family and realized they built a world where you do not exist, keep listening. Because what I did next was not just petty revenge, it was survival. And by the time karma finally finished its work, the tables turned so hard that none of us would ever be the same again. I stared at that photo until my vision blurred. My thumb hovered over their smiling faces. I saw my brother's arm around our mother's shoulders, my father leaning toward the lawyer, listening carefully. Everyone looked so proud, so certain, as if justice itself sat at that table. Meanwhile, the one daughter who had skipped promotions to drive home for surgeries, the one who had quietly wired money when the family business struggled, sat alone with microwave chicken and a pit in her stomach. I should have cried. Instead, my anger woke up like something that had been sleeping for years. I typed a comment without letting myself think too much. Nice to know where I stand. Good luck paying property taxes without my help. I stared at it one last time, then hit post. Within minutes, my phone began to vibrate. Calls from Mom, from Dylan, from a number I did not recognize that I assumed was the lawyer. I did not answer any of them. I just sat there in my little apartment with its peeling paint and secondhand furniture, listening to the steady buzz of my phone and the even louder roar of one brutal truth in my head. They did not forget me. They chose to leave me out. People always assume the scapegoat in a family drama did something terrible to deserve it. I wish I could tell you I ruined a wedding, crashed a car, stole money from my parents. It might make more sense, but the truth is more ordinary and somehow more cruel. I was born first. Then 2 years later, Dylan arrived and the son apparently moved. Growing up, my mother called him her miracle baby. He was blonde and loud and charming, the kind of boy teachers wanted to hug instead of discipline. When he forgot his homework, Mom baked cookies for the class. When he forgot my birthday, she said, "He is just busy, sweetheart. Boys are like that." I still remember one particular birthday. I had turned 10 that day. I had worked for weeks on a drawing of Grandma's house, every window, every flower bed, planning to give it to my mother as a surprise. That same day, Dylan brought home a crooked clay ashtray he had made in art class and slapped some glitter on at the last minute. Mine ended up in a drawer. His went on the mantel like it was a trophy. "That boy is so creative," Mom said, kissing his head. I learned early that my brother could get away with almost anything. Late curfew. He is just finding himself bad grades. He is more of a people person. The favoritism was so obvious it almost became a character in our house. Meanwhile, I played the role no one applauds for. The reliable one. The good girl. The quiet achiever. I got a partial scholarship and worked night shifts at a diner to pay for the rest of nursing school. When Dad had his first heart scare, I drove home between exams, sleeping in waiting rooms holding my mother together, while she held my father's hand. Back then, the family business, a small construction company my grandfather had built with his bare hands, was already slipping. There were rumors about mismanaged funds, a bad contract, some hidden truth no one wanted to say aloud. But instead of talking about it, my parents put on smiles and turned up the music for every backyard barbecue. The summer after I graduated, Dad called me. "We are behind on the mortgage," he said, voice low. "Only for a bit. The bank is being difficult. You know how it is." I was 24. I had just started my first real job. I had cheap shoes that made my feet bleed, a shared apartment, and a used car that coughed more than it drove. I still said yes. I told myself it was temporary, that it was what a good daughter did. I told myself that when Dylan found his footing, he would pitch in too. Years passed. I moved from the general floor to oncology, then to a senior position. The hospital called a team lead. They threw a small party in the break room. I got a paper certificate taped to the wall. My mother did not come. When I told her about the promotion, she said, "That is nice, honey. Dylan just found a new investor for the company. We are so proud of him." I kept wiring money. Property taxes, insurance. A new roof after a storm. By then, the house had grown into something more than wood and brick. It was a sinkhole for my savings and a shrine to my parents' idea of respectability. Every Thanksgiving dinner, my mother would stand at the head of the table and talk about family values, about sacrifice, about sticking together in hard times. She never looked at me when she said it. I started to wonder in the quiet between holidays what my life might have looked like if I had not been born their safety net. But I still believed in some stubborn corner of my chest that when it came time to put things in writing, they would be fair. That belief died the night I saw that photo and realized the will was read without me. The next morning, my mother finally got through. She waited until my workday started, knowing I would be in the hospital cafeteria, half distracted, trying to drink coffee that tasted like burned plastic. "Lauren," she said, skipping hello. "What on earth did you mean by that comment last night? You embarrassed us in front of everyone." I almost laughed. "Everyone, like the lawyer, the cousins, the neighbors you invited to the will reading instead of your own daughter." She sighed, the long theatrical kind that said she was the wounded one here. "It was just a small family meeting," she said. "We did not want to bother you. You are always working. It was about planning for the future, that is all." "Your future," I said quietly, "and Dylan's." She hesitated just long enough to answer my question. "We needed to discuss the business," she said. "You never wanted to be part of the company." Dylan stepped up. "He earned certain considerations." "Certain considerations," I repeated. "You mean the inheritance?" Silence. "Lauren, this is not about money," she said finally. "It is about responsibility. You live in another city. You are separate from things now." Separate? That one word told me everything I needed to know. I ended the call with some excuse about needing to get back to my patients. When I hung up, my hands were cold. Not because of the money. Because of the story my parents had clearly told themselves and everyone else. Lauren moved away. Lauren is busy. Lauren chose work over family. They had rewritten history so smoothly they probably believed it. I went back to my floor and spent the next 8 hours helping families receive diagnoses that would change their lives. I watched a grandmother tell her granddaughter that she would not be at her wedding. I watched a man my father's age hold his wife's hand and promise they would fight together. On my break, I sat in a dark corner of the stairwell and let myself think about the lawyer in that photo, the way my father leaned toward him, the serious look on my brother's face. Wills are not just about things. They are about what people think you are worth. The question burned: had they written me out? I did not have to wonder for long. 2 days later, my cousin Maggie called. She lives in another state and has always been the only relative who sees through my mother's polished stories. Her voice was hushed like she was smuggling contraband. "I should not be telling you this," she said, "but I am mad on your behalf." I closed my eyes. "Tell me anyway." She exhaled. "They had the will updated. The house goes to Dylan. The remaining shares of the construction company too. Your parents set up a little fund they say is for you. If you ever need help, but you are not on the deed, not on the business papers, Someone even joked that at least you will not have to deal with the headache. My chest felt like it had been hollowed out with a spoon. They said you were not interested in the family business, Maggie continued. That you have a good job. No kids, no real ties here. That Dylan is the one who stayed, who deserves to carry the legacy. The legacy. The same legacy my money had quietly kept alive. Why are you telling me this? I asked. Because it is wrong, she said. And because your mother said something that made my skin crawl. She said Lauren is better as a helper than an owner. I am sorry, Laura. I thanked her and hung up, then sat in my car in the hospital parking garage until the air went stale. Helper. They saw me as a permanent nurse, not just to strangers, but to them. Someone who cleaned up the mess, who changed the bandages, who sent the checks, who took the late-night calls, but not someone who deserved a seat at the table when it came to the very house my paychecks had helped keep. That was the first betrayal. The second one was still hiding, waiting to be discovered in a stack of mail. The envelope came a week later on a gray Thursday when my feet ached and the sky looked like wet cement. It was mixed in with the usual junk mail and charity flyers, thick cream paper with a logo I recognized, Ridgefield Community Bank. I almost tossed it aside, assuming it was another generic offer. But my name was printed in that stern, bold font banks use when they are not joking. Lauren Miller, co-borrower. A cold prickle ran up my spine. I tore it open, scanning the first lines. Past due notice, home equity line of credit, delinquent payment. I frowned. I did not own a home, only this small rented apartment that smelled like someone else's cooking. I read the next paragraph and my stomach dropped. The property address was my parents' mansion. I flipped pages, heart racing. There it was near the bottom in smaller print. Primary borrowers, Charles and Denise Miller. Borrower and guarantor, Lauren Miller. I sat down hard on the arm of my couch. For a second the words blurred. I told myself it had to be a mistake, some clerical glitch. I did not remember signing anything agreeing to any line of credit. I called the number on the letter, already regretting it and knowing I had no choice. After a labyrinth of menus, I landed with a polite man who introduced himself as Daniel from Account Services. How can I help you today, Ms. Miller? I forced my voice to stay even. I received a notice about a home equity line of credit. It lists me as a co-borrower. I never signed for this loan. There was a pause, the clack of a keyboard, the low hum of office noise in the background. I see the account here, he said slowly. It was opened late last spring. The system shows electronic consent under your profile. The signatures match prior authorizations. Payments have been late for 2 months, which is why you received that notice. I did not sign anything, I said, my voice sharper now. Can you send me the documents? We can email encrypted copies, he replied. But if you are alleging fraud, we will need to escalate this. I can transfer you to an account manager. My hands were shaking when I hung up. Minutes later, the emails arrived. I opened the first attachment and felt like someone had punched me. The signature block held my name. The squiggled line looked like my writing. The date was a day I had been at the hospital for a double shift a day. I could easily prove I had not been anywhere near Ridgefield. The access log showed the authorization had come through an online portal using credentials tied to a joint account my father and I had opened years back when I first started sending money for the mortgage. A joint account I had forgotten to close when they promised they would handle things themselves. I stared at the screen as a hot, shaky wave of realization moved through me. Someone had logged in as me. Someone had used my stored digital signature to open a line of credit against the house, tying me to a debt I had never agreed to. I did not need a judge to tell me who. My parents knew nothing about online banking, Dylan did. He had set up the account back then, telling me it would be easier for everyone if he handled the tech stuff. The line between carelessness and manipulation sharpened into something darker. There is a moment when betrayal stops being emotional and becomes mathematical, when it is no longer just about hurt feelings, but about dates, documents, and legal liability. I had reached that moment. My chest hurt, but my mind was suddenly clear. The will had cut me out. The loan had pulled me back in, not as a daughter, as collateral. That was the night I understood that this was no longer just a toxic family story. It was fraud, and I was done being quiet. Revenge is not always fire and screaming. Sometimes it starts in a quiet office with fluorescent lights and a man in a conservative tie who looks at your paperwork, then at you and says, "They cannot do this to you." The following Monday, I sat across from an attorney named Mark Jensen. He specialized in real estate and financial disputes, but what sold me was the tired kindness in his eyes. He looked like a man who had watched too many people learn what their loved ones were capable of. He read through the bank documents in silence, occasionally making a note, his lips pressing into a thin line. Electronic authorization reuse, he said finally. Classic. They accessed your credentials, used your stored signature, and the bank system treated it as legitimate sloppy security, but not unusual. The important part is that you did not consent. I did not. I said I would never. He nodded. We can dispute this. You will need to file an official fraud claim with the bank. We will also notify them that no further contact should go through your parents or your brother regarding this account. Everything comes to us. I felt my shoulders drop a fraction. What happens to the house? He folded his hands. That depends. If the bank determines that the loan was obtained fraudulently, they can go after the original borrowers, your parents, possibly your brother. If they can show he initiated or benefited from it, you would be released from liability. But the house itself is still at risk if the payments are not made. Part of me flinched at the idea of the house, that familiar front porch and carefully tended rose bushes, ending up with a bank-owned sign on the lawn. It held my childhood memories, my grandmother's voice, the ghost of every Thanksgiving dinner. But another part of me, the part that had been treated like an endless ATM, thought, maybe that is the only way they will ever understand consequences. Mark must have read something in my face. You have to decide what you are willing to live with, he said softly. Fraud is serious. Once we put this in motion, it may get ugly. I gave a short laugh. It is already ugly. They excluded me from their will while using my name to drown themselves in debt. How much uglier can it get? He did not answer. Instead, he handed me a form. Start by telling the bank exactly what happened. We will attach your work records for proof of your location on the day of the supposed signing. Let the facts speak. When I left his office, the sky outside was a sharp, bright blue. People walked dogs, bought coffee, held hands. The world did not know that a quiet war had begun over one family's secrets. That night, my mother called again. Then my brother. Then my mother again. I let every call go to voicemail. The next morning, there were 3 long messages waiting. Lauren, this is your mother. We need to talk about some misunderstandings. You have always been dramatic. Stop making everything into a confrontation. Laura, it is. Dylan. Mom is freaking out. Whatever you heard from the bank, just relax. Okay? We will fix it. You do not want to drag a judge into this. Think about Dad's health. Lauren, how dare you involve outsiders in family business? You are tearing us apart after everything we have done for you. I deleted the last message halfway through. Everything they had done for me. The mental gymnastics would have been funny if it had not been so familiar. For years, they had used guilt and obligation like tools. A forgotten birthday became proof. I was ungrateful. A missed Christmas visit because of a flu outbreak at the hospital turned into a story about me choosing strangers over family. Now they wanted me to choose them over myself yet again. But this time I had something stronger than outrage. I had evidence, I had a lawyer, and slowly I was building something I had never truly had with them. Boundaries. I filed the fraud complaint. I authorized Mark to speak on my behalf. I sent the bank everything they asked for. Then I did one more thing. I booked a drive home, not to fix anything, to look my family in the eyes and let them see that the quiet daughter they had pushed aside had finally learned how to fight back. The last time I walked into my parents' house before everything fell apart, it was the week before Christmas. The place looked like a magazine spread, twinkling white lights on the eaves, a perfect wreath on the door, a tree so tall it almost brushed the ceiling. It smelled like cinnamon and something roasting in the oven. For a moment, muscle memory kicked in. I was a kid again, coming in from the snow, cheeks burning, fingers, numb, drawn toward warmth. Then my mother appeared at the end of the hallway, and reality snapped back. Lauren, she said, surprised and not entirely pleased. You did not say you were coming. Maybe I wanted it to be a surprise, I said. You know, like that will reading or the extra mortgage line? Her expression tightened. This is not the time. It is exactly the time, I replied. Where is Dad? In the living room, she said, because she could not say anywhere else. Dylan will be here soon. We are having a small Christmas gathering. Family only, I asked. She flinched. I walked past her toward the living room. Dad was in his recliner, television on low. A football game casting flickering light across his face. He looked older, smaller somehow. When he saw me, his eyes widened. Lori, he said, using the nickname I had not heard in years. We were not expecting you. I know, I said, seems to be a pattern. He shifted, tugging at his sweater. Your mother thought, with your schedule, we did not want to impose. Impose by including me in the will, I said, or by tying my name to your debts without asking. He glanced at the hallway as if hoping my mother would swoop in and handle this. For once, she did not. The bank called us, he said instead, voice low. Said there was some sort of mix-up, that you are making trouble. A bitter laugh slipped out before I could stop it. They said, I am making trouble. Interesting choice of words for your son. Used my digital signature to take out more credit on a house I do not own. He winced. Dylan was just trying to keep the company afloat. We were cornered. You know how hard it has been. I know exactly how hard, I said, my voice shaking now. Because every time it got hard, you called me when the company lost that big contract, when the roof leaked, when you needed a new truck for the business. Who wrote those checks, Dad? He did not answer. He did not have to. My mother appeared in the doorway, then arms crossed. You need to lower your voice, she said. We are not doing this in front of your father. His doctor said no stress. I turned to her, anger and grief twisting together like a rope inside my chest. You should have thought of that before you gambled with my credit, my future, my name. Stop being dramatic, she snapped. We were going to tell you about the line of credit. Once things stabilized, you know your brother is handling the company. He needed flexibility. Your name helped us get better terms. It is still family money. Family money, I repeated. Funny how that phrase only comes up when you want something from me. The front door opened. Then cold air sweeping in. Dylan stepped inside, cheeks flushed, his new fiancée behind him, her glittering ring catching the light. They froze when they saw me. Wow, he said. The prodigal sister returns. What brings you home, Lore? The spirit of Christmas. Not quite, I said. More like the bank and a fraud investigation. His smile flickered. Come on. You are not really going through with that. You would not drag your own family into court. Watch me, I said. The room went quiet, except for the muffled commentary from the television. Somewhere down the block, a neighbor's Christmas music floated faintly through the cold. My mother stepped closer, her perfume too sweet. You are overreacting, she said. This is just a misunderstanding. We will adjust the will. We will add a little more for you if it makes you feel better, but you need to call off the lawyers. We do not air our dirty laundry in public. I looked around at the carefully decorated room, at the framed photos of Dylan's promotion party, Dylan's birthday dinners, Dylan's smiling face in front of the company truck. One photo of me sat on a side table from nursing school, graduation half obscured by a poinsettia. You already aired it, I said softly. When you posted that, Will dinner, and made sure the world knew I did not count. When you used me as a secret guarantor instead of a daughter. The only difference now is that there will finally be a record of what you did. Their faces shifted. Then all at once, my mother's eyes went hard. My father's shoulders slumped. Dylan's charm dropped, revealing something colder underneath. This is revenge, my mother said, almost spitting the word. You are doing this because you are jealous of your brother. Because you cannot stand that he is the one who stayed and carried the business. No, I said, this is not revenge, not yet. I reached into my bag, pulled out a stack of papers and laid them gently on the coffee table. Bank statements. Logins. The refinance agreement. A copy of the will summary. My cousin had slipped to me. Revenge. I continued. Would look very different. Revenge would mean I sit back and watch while you finally learn what it is like to face consequences without me there to cushion the fall. I picked up my coat. You have until New Year's to come clean to the bank, I said. Tell them who actually authorized that loan. After that, my lawyer moves forward and Judge Harper in county court gets a very interesting file on his desk. My brother scoffed. You would not dare. I met his eyes. You have no idea what I dare anymore. I walked out into the cold December air. my breath puffing in front of me, my heart pounding like a drum. For the first time, I felt something that was not hurt, not guilt, not obligation. I felt power. New Year's came and went. Fireworks exploded over the lake by my apartment. Bright colors reflected in black water. I watched from my balcony with a blanket around my shoulders, my phone on the table beside me. It stayed mostly silent. 2 polite emails from the bank acknowledged receipt of my fraud complaint. One short message from my father said, "Please reconsider," with no details. My mother went quiet, retreating into the sulk she had always used as punishment. Dylan posted party photos from some downtown rooftop, pretending nothing was happening. They had made their choice. The bank made theirs a few weeks later. Mark called me into his office with a stack of papers so thick it looked like a small encyclopedia. "The internal review is complete," he said. They compared the login locations, the timestamps, the device fingerprints. "The authorization came from your parents' house, not from your apartment, not from the hospital, not from any device tied to you." I stared at the evidence. Geography had joined the case. "They are removing you from the loan," Mark continued. "Liability shifts back where it belongs. The bank will demand immediate payment arrangements from your parents. If they cannot comply, they will begin foreclosure procedures." A part of me had hoped for some middle ground, some magical solution, where justice did not mean watching my childhood home slide toward a bank auction. Another part of me knew there had never been any middle ground. "Is there any chance they can keep the house?" I asked quietly. "Not without a miracle," he said, "or another silent benefactor, which you are no longer willing to be." He said it gently, but I heard the relief in his voice. Too many people in my position. Back down at the last moment, he had told me once. They choose the comfort of the title good daughter over their own safety. I had been that girl for too long. News travels fast in a small town when a supposedly respectable family teeters on the edge. Within weeks, my cousin sent me a whispered update. "People are talking," she said, "about the fraud, about the bank letters. Your mom is telling everyone you overreacted, but some of the neighbors remember how often your car was in the driveway when things went wrong. They are starting to put the pieces together." Gossip is its own kind of courtroom. It does not fix anything, but it shifts the ground under people's feet. My parents had always cared desperately about appearances. Watching that carefully curated image crack might have been enough revenge for some. For me, it was only the first act, because while the bank had been investigating, Mark had been digging into something else. "The will," he said one afternoon, sliding a thin folder across his desk. "You asked me to look into how recently it was changed. I did." The summary report was short. The will had been updated the same month the line of credit was opened, right after Dylan secured a new investor for the company. Right after my mother told everyone she was so proud of her son for stepping up. But that was not the part that made my throat close. "At first, your grandmother's estate was not relevant," Mark said, "but I requested old records out of curiosity. I am glad I did." He handed me a photocopy of an older document. My grandmother's original will, the one she had written years ago before dementia fogged her mind, back when she still sent me handwritten letters and pressed dried flowers between the pages. In that first will, she had left the house equally to both grandchildren, me and Dylan. A 50-50 split. Clear, fair, simple. Years later, after she passed the property and the business had been rolled into my parents' estate, somewhere along the way, equality had been erased. "It appears there was a quiet reassignment," Mark said. "Your parents claimed you were not interested, that you were better off on your own. No one contested it at the time. You were young, working hard, trusting them." Trust had become their favorite currency. I stared at my grandmother's looping handwriting at the line where she had written, "I want both my grandchildren to feel secure," and felt something deep inside me break and rearrange itself. This was not a one-time slip. It was a pattern, a history of taking what should have been mine, of reshaping narratives to make me look selfish any time I dared to question it. "What can we do?" I asked, my voice rough. Mark tapped the folder. "We can contest the will on the grounds of misrepresentation and undue influence. It will not be easy. Judges are cautious about overturning finalized estates. But the fraud with the loan supports a larger picture of manipulation." The word manipulation tasted bitter but accurate. "Do you want to go that far?" he asked. I thought of my grandmother's hands spotted with age holding mine while we baked cookies, her voice telling me I was her steady girl, the one who would always land on her feet. Yes, I said I do. If this had been a different kind of story, maybe this is where reconciliation would begin. Maybe my mother would call in tears, admit everything, beg for forgiveness. Maybe my brother would apologize and offer to make things right. In the story I actually lived, they doubled down. My mother started telling anyone who would listen that I was trying to steal the house out from under them. Dylan sent one furious text. "You are going to regret this." Maybe he thought that was a threat. To me, it sounded like foreshadowing. The first hearing took place on a rainy spring morning. The courthouse steps were slick, the sky a solid sheet of gray, the kind of day that makes you want to stay under a blanket and ignore your problems. Instead, I straightened my blazer, took a breath, and walked toward the heavy double doors. Inside, the courtroom was smaller than television makes them look: fluorescent lights, worn wooden benches, a faint smell of old paper. The judge, a woman named Harper, with sharp eyes and a calm demeanor, presided from the bench with an air of weary patience. My parents sat on the opposite side with their own attorney, a man who looked like he charged by the sigh. My mother wore black, as if she were attending a funeral. My father stared at his hands. Dylan sat behind them. Jaw clenched, his fiancée nowhere in sight. As the proceedings began, their lawyer painted a familiar picture. "Lauren is independent," he said. "She chose to move away, chose a demanding career, chose distance. My clients believed she was not interested in the family business or the property. They made reasonable decisions to keep assets with the child who stayed and contributed directly." I almost choked. Contributed directly. They glossed over the years of checks from my account, the quiet sacrifices, the Christmas shifts I had worked so others could take time off to be with their families. Then Mark stood. He spoke calmly, laying out dates, documents, the pattern. The original will from my grandmother, splitting assets equally. The quiet reassignment that shifted everything to my parents without my knowledge. The updated will that cut me out in favor of my brother. And finally, the fraudulent use of my digital authorization to secure more credit against the same house, binding me financially while excluding me on paper. The judge listened, expression unreadable. When it was my turn to testify, my legs felt like rubber. But once I started talking, the words came steady and clear. I told the truth about wiring money instead of taking vacations, about staying up late to talk my mother down from panic when the company won or lost contracts, about Thanksgiving dinners where my work was labeled selfishness and my brother's laziness was labeled finding himself. I did not cry. Not because I am strong, but because I had already cried those tears alone in stairwells and parked cars. Today was not for emotion, it was for clarity. My mother was called next. Under oath, her confidence wavered. She claimed she thought I knew about the will changes that we had talked about. It vague references to conversations that never actually happened. When pressed, she admitted she had never sent me any documents, never asked if I consented to the reassignment of my grandmother's wishes. "Did you inform your daughter that your son used her banking credentials to open a line of credit?" Mark asked. Her lips thinned. "It was not like that. We all agreed we needed to protect the house. Lauren has always helped. We assumed she would want to continue." Assumed, Mark repeated, not asked. Dylan took the stand last. He tried to turn on the charm, making little jokes, calling things a big misunderstanding. But under Mark's pointed questions and Judge Harper's steady gaze, cracks appeared. He admitted he had set up the online banking, admitted he had logged in on my behalf a few times when my parents did not understand the system. Admitted he had been in the room when the authorization went through. "Did you tell your sister that you were using her credentials?" Mark asked. He shifted. "She knew we were struggling. She has always been there for us." "That is not an answer," Mark said. "Did you tell her?" After a long pause, Dylan finally said the one word that mattered. "No." The judge called for a recess. As we filed out into the hallway, the air felt thick with unsaid things. My mother refused to look at me. My father gave me a single haunted glance. Dylan brushed past without a word. "Maggie." My cousin squeezed my hand. "You are doing the right thing," she whispered. I nodded, though the right thing felt like shattered glass under my feet. Back inside, Judge Harper delivered a temporary ruling. The will, she said, would remain in place until a full review could be completed. But given the evidence of financial manipulation and unauthorized use of my identity, she granted an injunction freezing any further changes or transfers involving the house or the business. It was not the final victory, but it was a line drawn in the sand. The house, the inheritance, the family business with its glossy trucks and hidden debts. All of it was now under a microscope. My parents walked out of that courtroom with their image intact, but their control fractured. I walked out with nothing tangible yet. No mansion, no money, no title. What I did have was something they had never given me willingly: leverage. The months that followed were a strange limbo. Legal processes move slowly, even when emotions are racing. Spring turned into summer. The hospital stayed busy. Life and death danced their endless circles around my shifts. At home, my days were quiet. No dramatic confrontations, no screaming matches on porches. Just letters, notices, updates from Mark. The bank has officially removed you from all liability. He told me one afternoon. Foreclosure proceedings on the house are moving forward. They have given your parents every chance to catch up. They have not. I pictured the front door where my mother once hung seasonal wreaths, now bearing a notice instead. The garden my grandmother had tended shrinking into weeds. If this had happened years ago, I might have rushed in, offered one more bailout, convinced myself it was the last one. Not anymore. The will review took longer. Old files had to be requested, testimonies gathered, financial records cross-checked. It felt like excavating an archaeological site built out of secrets. During that time, my mother tried one last tactic. She called late one evening when she knew I would be home from work and too tired to be fully armored. Her voice was softer than I had heard in years. "Lori," she said, sliding back into old nicknames. "Remember your grandmother's Thanksgiving dinners? The way she made that sweet potato casserole you loved?" I closed my eyes. "Yes, she always said family should stick together," my mother continued. "Do you really want our story to end in courtrooms and bank sales? We could undo this. We could sit down, adjust the papers, find a compromise. You do not have to punish us." Punish. It was stunning how she could frame accountability as cruelty. "This is not about punishment," I said quietly. "This is about truth. Grandma wanted things to be equal. You changed that. You used my name without asking. You decided I was good enough to pay, but not good enough to own. You are twisting everything," she snapped, the softness evaporating. "You always did like playing the victim? Well, fine. Take the house if you want. Take the company. See if it makes you happy. But do not come crawling back when you realize you destroyed your own family." "I am not taking anything," I said. "I am just refusing to let you keep what was never meant to be yours alone." I hung up before she could answer. It struck me then that in her mind I had already crawled away long ago. The moment I chose nursing in Cleveland over staying home to work in the construction company office, she had rewritten me as selfish. Everything since then had been staged to fit that script. Now, for the first time, a different narrative was on the table. One where the quiet daughter was not an extra, but a main character with a voice. Late that summer, Mark called with news. "The judge has issued her decision," he said, "on the will and on your grandmother's estate." I sat very still. She recognized a pattern of favoritism and misrepresentation. He continued, "While she cannot rewrite history, she can correct what is still in play. The house is under foreclosure and will likely be lost, but the proceeds of the sale after debts are cleared will be split equally between you and your brother. As for the business, whatever remains after creditors are paid must also be divided. It is not a complete restoration of your grandmother's original wishes, but it is as close as the law can come." This late, I exhaled slowly. It was not the movie version where the judge might hand me the deed and deliver a moral lecture. Real life is messier. Still, something heavy loosened in my chest. Equal. For once, that word was attached to me in my own family's story. There was one more piece. "The judge also admonished your parents for the unauthorized use of your identity," Mark added. "She has referred that part of the case to the district attorney. Whether there are further consequences is out of our hands now. Criminal charges were never my goal. I did not want my parents in orange jumpsuits, but I did want a system, any system, to finally look them in the eye and say, 'You cannot do this.' Not even to your own child." A few weeks later, I heard through Maggie that the company had effectively collapsed. The new investor had pulled out. Spooked by the legal drama, Dylan was scrambling, trying to reinvent himself as a consultant. My parents moved into a small rental house across town. No roses, no sweeping driveway, no illusion of a mansion holding up their pride. People whispered at church and at the grocery store. Some felt sorry for them. Some shook their heads and muttered about karma. I stayed out of it. When the foreclosure finally went through and the house was sold, I received a check. Not a life-changing fortune, but more money than I had ever seen in one place with my own name on it. I expected to feel triumphant. Instead, I felt tired. This money represented years of sacrifice, of being the invisible backbone. It also represented the end of something. I used part of it to pay off my student loans completely. Part of it went into savings. The rest I held on to, unsure what it should be. A replacement for the house I lost before I ever really owned it. A consolation prize for a childhood where love came with terms and conditions. Or a seed for something new. In the end, I bought a house, but not the kind my parents would have bragged about. It was a small 2-bedroom bungalow on a quiet street near the lake in a town about an hour from Cleveland. Faded blue siding, a sagging front step, a yard that needed love. The realtor tried to apologize for its flaws. I saw possibility. This place has good bones, she said. So did I. I realized. Underneath the strain and the hurt, there was something solid that had survived. I signed the papers with a sense of awe. This deed had only one name on it. Mine. No hidden guarantors, no secret beneficiaries. Just Lauren Miller, sole owner. The first night, I slept there on a mattress on the floor with boxes still stacked everywhere. I woke up to silence. No arguments, no passive-aggressive comments drifting through the walls. Just the sound of wind in the trees and a distant train. Peace felt unfamiliar, almost suspicious. I spent weekends painting walls, planting flowers, learning how to fix things. YouTube videos claimed were simple. I failed a lot. I also laughed more than I had in years. When the kitchen faucet sprayed me in the face, I sat on the floor in wet jeans and laughed until my sides hurt. One afternoon, my neighbor, an older woman named Carol with sharp eyes and a softer heart, stopped by with a plate of cookies. She had seen me hauling lumber from my car and decided I looked like I needed sugar. We sat on the porch steps, eating cookies and watching kids ride bikes up and down the street. I found myself telling her pieces of my story. Not all of it, not yet, just enough. My parents lost their house. I said I helped, then I stopped. It is complicated. Families always are, she said. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is stop letting people use you as their cushion. Feels more like revenge some days, I admitted. She shook her head. Revenge is trying to hurt them back. Sounds to me like you just stopped letting them hurt you. I thought about that for a long time after she left, because I will be honest. There were nights when I fantasized about sending my mother a photo of my new house with a caption like, "Look what honesty buys." Or about driving past their small rental place in my reliable used car, windows down. Music up, pretending not to notice them staring. I did neither. Not because I am noble, but because I had finally realized something. The best payback is not a dramatic scene or a perfectly timed Facebook post. The best payback, when you have grown up in a toxic family full of manipulation and lies, is a life that no longer revolves around their chaos. A life where your phone rings and your first thought is not, "What did I do wrong?" but maybe, "Who wants to grab coffee?" The legal case drifted into the background. The district attorney decided not to press criminal charges, citing my parents' age and the bank's partial responsibility. They received a formal reprimand, a black mark on their financial record that made future borrowing almost impossible. In another story, maybe that would feel like an injustice. In mine, it felt balanced. They lost the house they worshipped. They lost the company that let them call themselves small business owners at dinner parties. They lost the easy access to my wallet and my guilt. I lost the illusion that if I were just good enough, quiet enough, helpful enough, they would one day choose me. That is a trade I would make again. We spoke rarely after that. When we did, conversations stayed surface level. Weather, health, a distant cousin's wedding. Never the house, never the will, never the night. I sat in my apartment staring at a photo captioned "Family Only" and realized I was done begging to be counted. On the first Christmas in my new house, I invited a few coworkers and neighbors over for dinner. We watched old movies burned. The Rolls laughed until the dog across the street barked. At one point, someone asked what my family usually did for the holidays. Used to be a big production, I said. Lots of drama, lots of appearances to uphold. And now, I looked around at my mismatched plates, the slightly crooked tree I had decorated myself. The group of people who were here because they wanted to be, not because blood or obligation required it. Now I said it is quieter and more honest. You might expect the story to end there. House lost, new house gained inheritance, partially restored revenge, neatly wrapped. Real life does not stick to clean endings. About a year after the court's decision, my brother emailed me. Not a text, not a call, an email with a subject line so plain it almost hurt. Hey, I hovered over it for days before opening it. When I finally did, his message was short. I know you do not owe us anything, he wrote, but I wanted you to know, Mom is not doing great. She has been depressed since we moved. She blames you for everything, but I know I played a part. I should not have used your account like that. I am sorry for what it is worth. No grand confession, no detailed apology, just a few lines from a man who had finally seen the bottom of his own choices. I stared at the screen, anger and old love and exhaustion tangling inside me. I thought about the surveillance footage the bank had shown the signatures the nights he had gone to bed, knowing my name was on a loan while my name was missing from the will. I also thought about two kids riding bikes in our grandmother's driveway before we knew what words like inheritance and favoritism and toxic family meant. I typed many things, then deleted them. In the end, my answer was simple. I appreciate you saying that, I wrote. I hope you find a way to build something honest for yourself. I am not coming back into the family orbit the way it used to be. If you ever want to talk as brother and sister, without lies or money between us, you know where to find me. He never replied. Maybe he did not know how. Maybe my boundaries sounded like rejection to someone who had always equated love with access. My mother and I drifted further apart. She sent a generic card for my birthday one year with no personal note. I sent one back on Mother's Day. Our relationship shrank to something thin and polite, like strangers who remember each other's names but not much else. It hurt. Of course it did. Anyone who tells you walking away from your parents is easy has never actually done it. There were nights when I lay awake in my little blue house, wondering if I had overreacted, if I should have been more forgiving, if peace built over someone else's pain was really peace at all. Then I would remember the bank letters with my name on them, the will reading without an invitation, the photo captioned family only. I would remember holding patients' hands while they whispered last regrets about all the boundaries they had never set, all the parts of themselves they had given away to people who never respected them. And I would realize that the regret I feared most was not losing my parents' approval, it was losing myself. Slowly, I filled my life with other things. I took a part-time teaching role at the hospital, mentoring new nurses. I started running by the lake in the early mornings, watching the sun rise pink over the water. I made friends who did not expect me to fix their lives. On my porch, the flowers I had planted grew tall. Lilies, daisies, a stubborn rose bush that refused to give up even after a late frost. Sometimes when I watered them, I thought of my grandmother telling my mother, "You can grow things in the cold if you choose the right seeds." Maybe my mother had never believed that. I was starting to. If you have stayed with me this long through every twist and legal term and family confrontation, maybe it is because some part of my story sounds like yours. Maybe you have been the helper, the reliable one, the background character in your own family drama, the one who gets called when there is a crisis, who pays the bill, who smooths things over, who swallows hurt, so the Thanksgiving dinner can go on without a scene. Maybe you have watched parents, or a sister or a brother show favoritism so obvious, it feels like a joke no one else is willing to admit. Maybe you have been cut out of more than a will, cut out of conversations, out of celebrations, out of the picture, literally and figuratively. Here is what I want you to hear from someone who has lived it. Choosing yourself is not betrayal. Saying no to manipulation is not cruelty. Refusing to be used as collateral financially or emotionally is not revenge. Revenge was never really the point for me, even if the story started out feeling like a payback fantasy with a will. A lawyer, a judge, a mansion, lost, a company, crumbling tables turned. What I wanted deep down was something quieter and more radical. Justice. Not the gavel-slamming kind, though some of that helped. I mean the justice of finally having my reality acknowledged, of seeing in writing that what they did was wrong, of no longer carrying the entire weight of our family's image on my back while being treated like I did not belong. I did not get all the closure I thought I wanted. My mother never gave me a tearful apology. My brother never stood in front of the whole family and admitted what he had done. There was no big Christmas reconciliation scene with hugs and a warm fireplace. What I got instead was a small blue house, a garden I planted, myself a bank account with my name and my name only, mornings where the first voice I heard was my own, choosing my own day. Nights where silence meant peace, not punishment. I got to tell my own story, and that in the end is the sweetest kind of revenge there is. If you are listening to this and wondering whether you are allowed to draw a line with your own toxic family, consider this your sign. You are. You are allowed to question a will that feels unfair. You are allowed to say no when someone tries to use your name on a loan. You are allowed to walk out of a Thanksgiving dinner where you are treated like a servant instead of a guest. You are allowed to exist as more than the helper. I hope my story reminds you that inheritance is not just about houses and bank accounts. It is about the beliefs we accept and the patterns we pass on. My parents inherited a mindset where image mattered more than honesty, where one golden child was worth more than a quiet daughter who paid the bills. I'm choosing not to pass that on. If I ever have children, they will inherit something different. Not a mansion maybe, but a model of love that does not require them to disappear to belong. Until then, I will be here in my small blue house drinking coffee on the porch, listening to the wind move through the trees, grateful for every boring drama-free day. Grateful that when my phone rings now, I do not feel dread. Just curiosity. Now I want to hear from you. If you were in my place, cut out of the will while being used to prop up the family image, what would you have done? Would you have walked away sooner? Fought harder, stayed silent to keep the peace? Tell me in the comments. And if my story resonated with you, if you have lived your own version of inheritance betrayal and quiet revenge, do me one more favor. Like this video so other people can find it. Subscribe if you want to hear more real stories of family drama, toxic loyalty, and what happens when we finally say enough. Because sometimes the most powerful revenge is not what you do to them. It is the life you finally allow yourself to live without them.